We'll be back from the break. You are still watching The Point here on Smart 24 television. Our conversations now get into the final take of what we've been discussing here in regards to how sustainable Uganda's public debt can be the next financial year. Now, the issue may be the next financial year, but then we should as well set a foundation for the following years. So that we cannot get into the situation, because by the look of things, if we move the way we are moving, by 2025 we shall already have a 100 trillion debt already on us, and the debt burden is actually not for the leaders we are currently having, but for the generations to come, because at the end of the day, when the leaders leave, you get to realize the burden continues. So we continue servicing the loan. We continue servicing these debts. It is not going down. It's rather only increasing. Now, not only that, you get to also remember there are quite a number of fundings that we are likely not to get anymore, since the president signed into law the anti-homosexuality bill, and it's now law. So you get to realize that we got various threats at the end of the day. And of course, it took effect. Quite a number of NGOs stopped receiving some funding. And of course, this has started affecting or hitting the country's economy. However much it is hitting the country's economy, we can still look for other ways of survival as a country, because you need to be able to at least say that you can ably run your economy, not only looking at Western donors or other donors, regardless of the fact that it is still vital to get some assistance as a country. Now, when we look at our resource envelope, how are we going to make sure that we increase this resource envelope? In the resource envelope here, in regards to domestic revenues, 29.7 trillion is the target for Uganda Revenue Authority, Stephen. And when you look at it, it seems that is the target URA is setting. So that means the pinch is to make sure that Ugandans have to pay that. If it exceeds in regards to the collection, it's a plus for us. If we don't hit it, it's a minus. Now, how are we going to, get into that situation whereby we are shooting for the stars, making sure that we even exceed our targets in revenue mobilization? Because I think with that, we shall be decreasing on the borrowing, because the economy will be servicing the budget itself.
Yeah, that's where I want to go.
Yes.
Our previous discussions have been seeing how to reduce some wasteful expenditure, seeing where we can do budget cuts or prioritize.
Yes.
I'm happy using prioritizing than cutting.
Because if you say cutting, we would expect maybe the national budget, instead of being 52 trillion, should have been 40 trillion, because it's cut. But the money is there, it's not cut, but it was put into other sectors. So my question is it going to the right sectors? So just how are we going to increase? We might not increase the amount of money a lot.
Yes.
That is available, that we are collecting. But if we reduce the corruption, we reduce wasteful expenditure, we prioritize projects that yield higher value, that is, and then effectively and efficiently utilize the available resources, I believe the rate of our debt burden will keep reducing, because we are able to service the one we already have, but also utilize the one we have to put development projects, to work on our infrastructure, and this equally translate into development. And development, the right development leads to more creation of business, it leads to a thriving private sector, and that's where the money comes from.
Okay.
Because government gets its money from the private sector, and so all efforts that we are doing should be aimed at developing the private sector. Okay. Government employs very few people. The people employed by government is so few compared to the private sector. So let's do investments that promote the private sector. We can talk about all the strategies of collecting revenue. As long as the private sector, the 2 or 3 million people that are paying taxes, are the only ones paying taxes, we will not increase. on our taxes. Actually, it might even start reducing because our appetite for investment, for even every now and then administrative units keep coming up.
Yes.
And that means more expenditure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and Madam Theopista here, when you look at how we are going to increase on our revenue collection, not only that, how are we going to expand on our resource envelope as a country, not only in the next financial year, but also looking ahead of the other financial years to come?
Yeah. So to add on to what Stephen has talked about, I previously talked about the tourism industry and the potential it has.
Yes.
Then the other one that has potential that also the president talked about during the State of the National Address,
yes,
was the sports and the creative arts industry. That is an industry that has potential for bringing revenue into the country. You see the amount of money when ProTeach goes abroad and gets us a medal, they get some good amount of money from him. So what if we had like 50 of those that go out there and make for the country money? We have musicians, yeah, and that industry has potential for bringing us income, but they are still facing challenges around the copyright law. And this time around, the president instructed the ministry, I think the Ministry of Gender, to work with the Attorney General to ensure that that law is reviewed and passed, so that now we have more potential for that industry generating us resources as a country. So that is one of the sectors that youth can tap into. But going forward as a country, the other thing that we need to do is to do risk analysis as a country. For example, we have budgeted, URA is expecting, has a target, but also we have a budget of 52 trillion, but we don't expect things to just be smooth, yeah? There are things that come in play that might disrupt the economy. If you look at the disasters, like for example, if climate variations will be here, and then they will tell you how the people in Bududa need to be relocated to other areas because of mudslides and all that. Kasese, or we never know now. You've just seen what the ADF have done. So usually we need to have in mind that there are certain predictable risks that we need to look into and have a mitigation strategy as a country. I think at times we go wrong on that. If I give an example, at one time there was a discussion that was happening, and I was asking Honorable Barrio Monsi, you remember during COVID when the president announced a lockdown, yeah? These people, they all had meetings before. They advised the president and all that. So they knew the president was going to pronounce a lockdown. But they did not plan for certain things of children are in school. How
Yes.
are we going to manage them going back home? And you saw a stampede. The president pronounced and there was a stampede, and they had to look for money to get buses to get these children. But had they to look into what are the likely risks, how do we plan to mitigate them, that should have been avoided. So usually as a country, we don't plan so very well, even when we have a ministry in charge of disaster and what, we don't really have a good risk plan and mitigation strategy as a country. So going forward, I think URA needs that, and we need that as a country.
Okay, and of course, when you look at how we create or have what you could call how is the country prepared for crisis management, that's also another key concern as a country. But also looking at the next financial year. By this time last year, our debt wasn't at 86 trillion, and within the year we were getting grants. These are grants, we got some grants because of the fact that most of the countries were just getting out of COVID. And so different organizations, world bodies were giving out grants. And of course, the other loans came in. But how are we going to be able to utilize such grants that normally come into the country? Because even in the budget for this next financial year, there is a percentage where the money is definitely going to be coming from a promised grant that we are sure of it is coming. So in most of the times, this is the money where the corruption tendencies come in. You do realize that at times it leads to the delay of projects or failure of these projects, and these projects are either pushed into the next financial year or either way calling for supplementaries. You mentioned corruption. That means in our kind of in this particular conversation, as we are summing up, really, how are we getting rid of such situations as a country? Is it a concern of our leaders themselves, or is it really is it just a fault, a default setting as a country?
To answer that question, just to be exact, in this current budget, about 8.26 trillion is going to be funded by what we call budget support. Donors will say we are going to give money for malaria, maybe under malaria consortium.
Yes.
We're going to give money under Gavi, money for HIV drugs and what. So 8.26 trillion is going to come as budget support. Now your question is, how are we going to utilize this money to make sure it serves the right purpose? It still stems from what we are talking about, fixing the leakages.
Yes.
Timely implementations of interventions that this money is going for. Because if you don't utilize this money is coming from donors. If you don't utilize it as planned, the money will go back and you will not use it. Because when you don't use donor money, there are tendency of them taking it back because you will not utilize it. So the bureaucratic processes that sometimes delay projects needs to be cut down. But also there has to be monitoring and accountability standards that are in place. There is something we've been advocating for, is to do issues of price list of government contracts and all. We want to know how much does it, for example, cost to construct on average, how much does it cost to construct a kilometer of a road? That government knows how much does it cost to buy a bag of cement, the price list of those things, so that when someone is doing a government project, there is a limit, there's within range, that we know that this is supposed to be within this range. If you are constructing a government building, for example, maybe a flat of 5 floors, we know that it cannot go, for example, beyond 50 billion. We know that given other factors and risk and mitigation and projections, there has to be within a certain range. Yes, so we are advocating for, we have been talking about the price list of government.
Okay.
So that can ably enable us to utilize the donor support. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And well, of course, as we continue to look deeper into that sustainability as a country, I don't know what your take is on that, though, for you as a Ugandan. I do understand most of the Ugandans really have less time to focus on Uganda's business world, simply because many of them are actively in there, but surprisingly, things are not really moving well. We all understand at some point business is really tight. The working environment is quite tight. Some people actually choose to close businesses and get back to employment, while the others continue to strive harder until they break the barriers. But well, as we are summing up still, when you look at the young people, let's get into the involvement of the young people, Mr. Opista here. How are we going to get our young people into an organization, into an organized kind of system, for them to get in, to get in line with Uganda's current economic status? Because you realize the young people are strictly in a different world than the policies being made. And then surprisingly, you realize that these policies are also made for the majority of the Ugandans, of which these are the youth. So how are we getting them into such conversations, into these spaces of making sure that they understand the impact of debt, how we can deal with such cases, and how we can collectively work as Ugandans to ensure that we, remit the taxes or we contribute to Uganda's economic growth?
So for the young people, we need to can I say, revive hope in them. They have lost hope in the government transforming the country for their betterment as young people. So we need to restore hope. And how do we restore hope? Is by addressing corruption, and by ensuring that we are able to provide services. Then secondly, we need to provide young people with the right skills. We know that in this year's budget, 60 billion has been allocated to skilling the youth. But what kind of skills are we giving the young people? Are we still giving them those skills that make them still earn the kind of money that cannot sustain them in the current generation? What kind of skills are we giving young people? That is two. And then the other one, I think if we invest in digitalization, because this is a digital era, and young people can work better if they are able to innovate, if they are able to invent. So I'm glad they said that this time around they are going to invest in internet coverage so that we have a good bandwidth that enables us to do business as young people. So that will be a right thing to do. But also, lastly, is we need to tap into the potential of our young people. I know the curriculum has been revised, but still we don't have the right equipment to facilitate that curriculum. So the current curriculum that our young people are studying under does not give them the right skills to compete in this century. So if we went back and revised our education system to give the right skills, but also there is a thing that we've been advocating for, the youth service scheme, where we have our young people, like for example, when they get out of a university, they get into a scheme that works on mindset change and preparing them to get into the job market. That would be a plus if it is passed.
Stephen, how do we get young people involved in such discussions? Young people right from universities. I think at the university level, most of them are already into understanding how policies run. But then besides the universities, we have young people who are running businesses informally, but they understand how money works. And I think those are the people who really as well need to understand how the budget works and how the various allocations go into context. How are we getting involved?
In my opening remarks, I told you about the opportunities for the youth in this budget.
Yes.
There is 30% of the 1.1 trillion that is for them. There is 800 billion under the GROW project for the women, which is also part of the women are youth. There is the 60 billion for skilling the youth. There is 100 billion under the Myoga, which we believe mostly will be utilized by the youth. That is our prayers. So the next step is, there's this money targeting the youth, but how can the youth utilize it? So that is where the issues of involving the youth in the processes. Can we do advocacy? Can we tell the youth that there is this money, please go and get it. Please go and understand the ways you can utilize it. That is my key message. Because if we don't tell the youth, will be there complaining, there's no money, we are not seeing the money. But the money is there. If you don't go and look for it, or if you don't go and ask for it, it will stay there in the government accounts, and the money will end up going back. So I'm calling upon the youth to utilize this money. Ask the district, like for example, under the Myoga, form groups, enterprising groups. You told there are young people who have businesses, who have good ideas. Can they get together, form these groups, access this Myoga fund, and invest and do something productive for themselves? Yes, so it's about putting the information. The problem is, I know that there's this money that is going to the youth. The youth doesn't know that they have this money. So Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, and part of the mindset change, can we tell the youth that, well, we have the problem, the money is little. Sometimes there's a lot of corruption. However, in all these problems, there's an opportunity for the youth as well.
Okay.
There's this money allocated to the youth. Yeah.
Well, and again, I'll stick with you as you give us your final remarks, your recommendations to the government as we're summing up with our conversation here.
Yeah. So still not all is lost.
Okay.
I also commend the government for the efforts trying to mobilize resources, setting higher targets, which is good. It's always good to set higher targets, so that if you don't hit the higher targets, at least you hit the right target. So that's one. But also now, for us to sustainably meet our needs and as a country, the government needs to invest in, like this current budget, this new budget that is going to be implemented in the next financial year, or actually next month. Let's put our money where we can get maximum benefits. Let's put money where it can generate maximum benefit, because we don't have a lot. But also now, the little we have,
yes,
can we practice fiscal discipline? Can we stop unnecessary supplementaries? Can we reduce on wasteful expenditure? Can we actually, this one it seems small, but it's good. It's very important. Can we implement projects at the right time? So that we don't have, if a project is meant for 1 year, can it be completed in 1 year? Because if it's not completed in 1 year and enters into another financial year, that is a financial implication. We are talking about, you gave an example of the Lubawa hospital. If they had planned it to be 5 years and it's done, it's not yet done. You see the implication. They are asking for supplementary to continue with the building. So that is the kind of conversation that we are having. But also, I'm calling upon the citizens to know the budget. You see, we've done a lot of advocacy. Last week we were with URA at the regional budget breakfast, where we are telling the citizens what is the budget, the opportunities in the budget, how can they be part of the budget. So now the only thing we can ask for is the citizens to take responsibility and say, and own this budget. The leaders could have debated and allocated these budgets, but now it's their budget. It is meant to develop our country. It's meant to develop me and you and the youth, the population out there. So can we take responsibility and say how much was allocated for the youth? I've just said 30% of the Imyoga fund is for the youth. 30% of the Imyoga fund is for the women. Can we take responsibility and say, I'm going to my district, I'm going to ask this money, I'm going to see how we can benefit from this money.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then Mr. Kiza, your final remarks as we wind up.
Yeah, so as we wind up, I also want to thank the Ministry of Finance and the other stakeholders for this budget. I think it is a good budget. It's a good budget if only we address the challenges that Stephen has talked about. So for me, I would just say that I would request the president to make these institutions independent. I think the guys at Ministry of Finance are really good. They really have very technical people that can really plan and budget right for this country if they have the support from other stakeholders, the citizens, the members of parliament, and the president. And if the president can also, as a person, reduce on pronouncements. You know, at times he might get excited in a certain meeting and then he will be like, okay, we are increasing the salaries of this, but that is not in the budget. So you find the Ministry of Finance struggling, and that is how we come to ask for supplementary budgets. So I think the president also needs to own up the budget and know there is a budget that we are working under. And lastly, mine would be to re-emphasize the role of citizens in the budget process. They need to know what is in the budget, because they are the ones, they are the eyes and the ears on ground. They are the ones who go to the hospitals, so they need to whistleblow. If a certain amount of money was allocated for a certain hospital to work on a certain road and the road is not worked on, it is their responsibility to put our leaders, to hold them accountable, so they have a role to play. If they don't play that role and only a few people are speaking, then we will still have the budget not delivering the services that we want as a country.
All right. And indeed, that's the end of our conversation this evening. I've had Theopista Kiza, who's the head of programs, African Youth Development Link. And of course, I've also had Alo Stephen from CS-BAG, as we've been highlighting quite a number of details in regards to how sustainable Uganda's debt is in the next financial year. It's a very huge concern for the country, like I did mention. And of course, the point, we analyze economic policies, one of which today is looking at how or which measures can we put in place to ensure that we can survive this kind of pressure of our ever-growing public debt as a country. I'm Joram Paul Sonko. Many thanks for being part of The Point. Till next time, good evening.